Sorry, everyone, slight feedback. Is everyone ready to make a start? We shall start. Thank you very much, everyone, for coming. Happy St. Patrick's Day for anyone here who might be affected. Excellent. Right. The first item on our agenda today is apologies. Do we have any apologies?
Thank you, Chair. No, there are no apologies to report.
Excellent. In which case, item number 2, declarations of interest. Is there anyone who wishes to declare an interest on any item on the agenda? Yes, Dave.
Yeah, I'm a member of CamCycle.
Excellent, thank you. That is noted. Remember, you can declare an interest at any point if it comes to your mind later. Item number 3, minutes of previous meeting. Has anyone got any comments on the minutes that were circulated? Nothing from anyone. In which case, shall I take it as agreed that I will sign them, which I will do very soon. Number 4, membership of this board. I've got a couple of things to report. The university has nominated Dr. Christine Ann Rutter as one of the Joint Assembly representatives to replace Lucy Scott. The executive board is required to confirm this appointment. Are we okay with it? Going once, going twice, agreed. I should further report that Phil Almendinger, whose name I am no doubt mispronouncing, and I am sorry about that, is to step down as the university representative on the executive board. You know, I'm told Phil has been with us for a very long time, in fact, rather a lot longer than me, and we thank him very much for the work he has done. Andy Neely will attend meetings in his capacity as a substitute member until we can appoint a replacement. Is that okay with everyone? Everyone's happy? Item number 5, questions from the public. We have received 13 public questions relating to the following agenda items. Agenda item 7, the greenways, there are 4 questions. Agenda item 9, the road network hierarchy review, 2 questions. And agenda item 10, Milton Road, 7 questions. We have published details of these questions on the website, and the board has seen them in advance. Some people are attending in person to ask their questions, and some people have requested to have their questions read out. So we will do that. And we will ask people to come forward or not, as the case may be, at the beginning of each agenda item. The following representatives from partner bodies have asked to participate at the chairperson's discretion. On the greenways, we will have a statement from Councillor Susan van der Ven. On Milton Road, we will have Councillor Chenny Payne and Councillor Jamie DL, addressing the meeting, as well as Councillor Scott, who is not on my notes, but I can see her. So we will have these people as well, which brings us neatly into agenda item number 6, which is feedback from the Joint Assembly. So we usually have Councillor Tim Bick, who's the chair of the Assembly, who's with us today, and he will provide us with an overview of the meeting held on the 17th of March, which is not true because the 17th of March is today. 17th of February, there you go. They had an assembly meeting, and Councillor Bick has given us a report, which we thank him for, and he will give us his feedback on each agenda item. Is that correct? Thank you very much, Councillor Bick. Now, having done the sort of householdy kind of stuff, I think we should make a start on agenda item number 7, which is the Greater Cambridge Greenways Progress Update. So this will be done as follows. We will have some public questions on the item. We will have a partner body representative, as I said, Councillor van der Ven making a statement. We will have the report presented to us by the relevant officer. We will have Councillor Bick talk to us about the Assembly's feedback on it, and then we will have a debate. So, we have got public questions first, some of which Vilma will read for us. Do we have Vilma? Hello.
Yes, the questions are as follows. The first one is from Councillor Robert McCubbin, Parish Councillor, Little Wilbraham and 6 Mile Bottom. Little Wilbraham, Great Wilbraham and 6 Mile Bottom have no active travel possibilities, with no cycle paths and only narrow unlit roads connecting our communities to basic amenities such as schools, GP surgeries, shops, leisure facilities and places of work. Although the Greenways scheme will provide sustainable connections to key sites and centres of population, it does not provide any radial routes to allow villages such as ours to connect to this network, leaving dangerous sections, preventing anything but a car trip. This is despite our being within easy cycling distance of Cambridge and other centres. There is no bus service except once in the early morning and back in the mid-evening, yet are within easy distance of Fulbourn and Bottisham, both of which will be on Greenways routes and are on regular bus routes. Our roads are also used extensively by HGVs travelling between the A11 and the A14, adding significantly to the difficulties for cyclists. A survey of residents here in December 2021 had a 31% response rate. 98% wanted a safe cycle path from the villages. 45% have household members that currently rely on others to drive them. 89% enjoy and are willing to cycle. 92% currently don't cycle because parts of the cycle route feel too dangerous and unsafe. 97% said safer cycle routes would increase the chances of their cycling. The recent death of a local cyclist from injuries suffered at the junction of the Wilbraham Road and the A1303, where there is no safe cycle crossing, is widely reported, and links to these have been provided on the published version of the questions on the website. There has been another cyclist fatality in February near Little Wilbraham. Will the links between the Bottisham and Fulbourn Greenways via the Wilbrahams and 6 Mile Bottom be prioritised as part of the next phase of the Greenways project? And the next question is from Iris Bostanchi and reads as follows. 3 years ago, I went to Cambridge JCP to ask how old I would be by the time the bike path to Royston is finished. I am now 10 and going to secondary school next year. It feels like there has been no progress. How old will I be when I can ride my bike safely to Royston? I don't really want to buy a car when I'm older. The next question is from James Talbot. He's from the Eversden Cycling Campaign. Whilst we recognise that the focus of the current work is the agreed network, we agree strongly with the view that the greenways do not extend far enough, there being too much focus on the improvement of existing corridors rather than the development of new ones. The Eversdens, with their growing population, lie in a 10-mile square patch with no cycle paths and no bus services. Please may I ask when the next opportunities may arise to provide us with much needed safe cycling connections to locations such as our catchment schools in Comberton and to Barton, from where we may safely access the Greenways and Cambridge. And the next question is on behalf of CamCycle and reads as follows. On Friday, CamCycle placed a ghost bike at the junction of Little Wilbraham Road and the A1303, where a collision led to the death of a man who was cycling there earlier this year. 3 years ago, responding to the GCP Bottisham Greenway consultation, the local Cycling UK group, CTC Cambridge, called for a safe crossing here. Locals from the Wilbrahams and 6 Mile Bottom have also asked for safe connections to the Greenways, as the villages are less than 10 miles from Cambridge, but fall between Fulbourn and Bottisham routes. It is a scandal that in 2022, so many people from rural communities have to weigh up the risk to their lives before walking and cycling for everyday journeys, because there are no safe routes for them to use. We'd like to ask the GCP if they could include a safe crossing from Little Wilbraham Road to the Bottisham Greenway and to add in safe routes from the Wilbrahams as part of the forthcoming active travel projects. And if I can continue, Chair, Councillor Susan van der Ven, who has submitted a statement as a partner of a member authority, has asked that the following be read out on her behalf.
Of course. Can you read that out for us now?
I'd like to thank the Greenway officer team for the kind offer to join the A10 Corridor Cycling Campaign meeting next week in order to update local businesses, school commuters, and in particular those without a car who depend on cheap everyday cycle transport on the Melbourne Greenway progress. Following the adoption of the Melbourne Greenway scheme nearly 2 years ago, it will be vital to reassure local stakeholders that practical steps forward are coming soon, particularly on the key Melbourne-Royston path and bridge link that is so vital to local connectivity. Please could the board advise on what steps are planned outside of the anticipated September to October public consultation to reassure local stakeholders who have already made financial commitments toward the delivery of the Melbourne-Royston link. And that concludes the questions and representations, Chair.
Thank you very much, Vilma. I believe we will have answers to these, and I think Peter is with us via video link. How are you doing, Peter?
Hello, Chair. Yeah, I'll go through some answers to the questions that you've just been asked. So in terms of Councillor McCubbin's question, and this is similar to a number of the questions that have been asked, the proposed Greenway network is extensive. It's 12 routes, it's almost 150 kilometres of active travel provision. It's been through public consultation and the Executive Board approved the network in 2020. Currently, there are no plans for a subsequent phase of greenways or additional links. However, we are in discussions with partners regarding how we could integrate the greenways into the wider active travel network, including potentially expanding the greenways network once we've delivered the current phase. In terms of Iris's Bostanci's question, thank you for the question. The greenways network's a big project, and unfortunately that takes time to deliver. It's 150 kilometres. Albeit the Melbourne Greenway is part of that. The report outlines the progress that has been made to date and the planned engagement for all of the greenways that will happen over the next 12 months. In particular for Melbourne, that will happen in September. And the Greenways programme remains on track to complete by the target delivery date of 2025. In terms of the question from James Talbot, again, similarly asking about, what beyond the current phase of greenways. So whilst we have no final plans at the moment, we are in discussions with partners about how we can certainly integrate greenways into the wider active travel network and also potentially expand into a future phase. And again, Matthew Danish's question is the same regarding potentially future developments beyond this existing phase by 2025. And then finally, Chair, in terms of Councillor van der Ven's question, the planned public engagement exercise will be an ideal platform to reassure those local stakeholders in Melbourne and beyond who have made financial commitments to the scheme. It will provide the opportunity to discuss detailed design issues and delivery timelines. Nevertheless, we are continuing in discussions with key stakeholders such as Hertfordshire County Council about both the bridge, engineering design and options for funding it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Peter, for those answers. Now, I believe you should introduce the report to us. Is that okay to do that now?
Yes, Chair, just a brief introduction. This is a short report in advance of a substantive Greenways report that will come to the board in September of this year. Greenways network, as I've already outlined, is an extensive network of 12 greenways outlined in the map in paragraph 1.4. And the programme is on track to deliver. We've The concept was originally sort of developed in 2016. We delivered a whole series of greenways quick wins in 2018-19, following on then from public consultation and through to board approval in 2020. There are a number of network-wide work streams that are underway. So the outline business case that will come back to the board in September of this year, design principles, wayfinding strategy, and land referencing. But there's also a series of detailed work streams for each of the greenways that's really updated the design. We've gone through topographical analysis, analysis of environmental constraints and deliverability. The next stage of planned engagement is outlined in 4.7. So over the next 12 months, all of the greenways will go through a further phase of public engagement, and the Joint Assembly were anxious that was with local communities rather necessarily than with key stakeholders. And the recommendations, Chair, are as outlined. I'll happily try and answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you very much. We appreciate you joining us today. Okay, before we open this up for debate, do we have any feedback from Councillor Pick from the Joint Assembly? I understand this was discussed.
Yes, thank you, Chair. The Assembly did support the direction of travel outlined in the report, so that's kind of good news, I think. But I do need to report that there was a level of frustration coming from Assembly members, but also reflected in some of the public questions to us, that the report itself was a bit of a disappointment in the sense that it was really highly generic, and from decisions taken before in respect of the greenways, it's not really one big part of a project. It's now 12 different projects, and the report didn't really tell people what they wanted to understand about where each of those really is at the moment and what the issues are that are being encountered in delivering them. And I think in one respect this is all good news because there is great anticipation and interest, but it is disappointing that the appropriate level of transparency didn't accompany this. And so the Assembly was keen to make sure that the board was aware of our interest in having a much more transparent way of tracking these for members and members of the public going forward, and that the promised report in the autumn shouldn't be a one-time event. It should be something which opens up that level of transparency ongoing, so that people don't need to kind of come to these meetings to find out what's going on in their local Greenway project.
Thank you very much indeed for that, Councillor Pick. Do we have any comments from members of the board about this report? Anyone at all? Yes, Neil.
Okay. So just picking up on some of the questions from Camp Cycle and from the Wilbrahams, and indeed Councillor Bick's report from the Assembly. I think that I understand this report is an interim report, but I think there's a lot of expectations which we have to have of the report in September when it comes back, to get that degree of transparency around the detailed project schedules and the commitments, because at the moment this is looking as though there's a sort of big bang in 2025, and that actually isn't the way in which the original projects were conceived of. There were lots of interim deliveries, and we are 2 years in now from the original approvals in 2020. So I think in September we need to see some sort of detailed, if we were running this as a project, we'd say we'll have Gantt charts. In fact, if you go back to the original approvals in 2020, there were those Gantt charts for each of the individual segments, and I'm presuming that that is what we will see in September. I think that's really important to hold ourselves accountable to the schedule of delivery, which is actually what many of the questions and the comments are alluding to, a bit of frustration that there isn't that accountability to delivery on what are very important projects. And you know, I've got a lot of sympathy as well with the view of the questions about connecting the core network. That's how it will really get the value, but we haven't got a core network at the moment, and that needs to be the priority. In terms of the next steps in 9.2, I think that the delivery timeline needs to be, you know, this needs to be a major look at all of these projects and the subcomponents of those projects. The last comment I would make is on 5.2, which was the comment about land acquisition and the executive board's appetite for compulsory purchase orders. My appetite is very strong in terms of unlocking land acquisition, any land acquisition obstacles we have on these schemes. I would just put it on the record that I think that is obviously we will look at the individual circumstances, but it is really important that we actually deliver these. And I understand land acquisition is an issue, but it is something we certainly need to address. So, you know, welcome the report. I think I view it as an interim step until September, and hopefully we will see the detail, which I think the questioners are looking for, and indeed I am looking for as a board member as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Neil, for that. Dave, do you have any comments?
Yeah, just very briefly to agree with Neil about the land acquisition. We need, you know, it has my political support as well. And so we need to, as quickly as we can, get this whole area closed down.
Thank you very much for that. If there are no other comments, I think, and do please shout if there are any more, but I think I can probably fairly summarize this by saying that, you know, there is a lot of positivity out there for this. It's a very, very, it's not a good word, but it's a very easy sell. It sounds good. It's exactly the kind of thing we should be doing, and we should prepare ourselves for a good big deal of scrutiny on the actual detail of what we're about to do, and I think that's a really very good steer for us, for the public, for the Assembly. I hope I can say message received. Peter, do you have any comments in response to what the board has said, other than, I don't know?
No, I think in part it reflects the points that Councillor Bick was raising at the Assembly, and so we took that away from the Assembly, and we'll be bringing back the delivery programme in September.
To which we all look forward very much indeed. In the absence of any further comments, I should probably summarise the recommendations that we are agreeing today. We are being recommended to note the proposal to present the outline business case and the delivery programme for the greenways to the September board, and agree the proposed engagement with local communities. So I think we can say that we are going to agree these. Any dissent? Shall I take them as agreed? Going once, going twice, agreed. I'm going to do that once. Thank you very much, everyone, for contributing to this debate. It was very useful. We will now move on to item 7, which is the Chisholm Trail. We will have, I don't think we have any questions on this one, do we know? So we will receive a presentation from Peter again, I think. We will receive feedback from Councillor Bick, and we will debate it. So, Peter, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. So this is phase 2 of the Chisholm Trail. Members will be aware that phase 1 opened just prior to Christmas and included the Abbey Chesterton Bridge. Phase 2 starts at Coldham's Lane Junction and then continues into Cambridge Central Station. In 2019, the Executive Board allocated an overall budget for phase 2 of the trail of £5 million, and so we're developing this as part of the next steps. Phase 2 is very different to phase 1 Phase 1 was largely a discrete project. It required planning permission and involved a significant element of infrastructure, in particular the bridge. Phase 2 doesn't. It's a series of discrete elements that together will provide that off-road segregated cycling and walking solution that people are valuing. There are a number of scheme elements, and they're outlined in section 5. In terms of some of them are for GCP to progress, such as Coldham's Lane Junction, and we're proposing there'll be a public consultation on the details of that in the summer. As some are for partners such as Network Rail to progress, and indeed some are being delivered through the planning process. And we're working with the developers and particularly the local planning authorities to do that. The recommendations are outlined, Chair, and I'm happy to answer any questions the board may have.
Thank you very much indeed, Peter. And can I say just how much of a pleasure it is to actually start on phase 2. This is a project that we're all very, very keen on. Councillor Bick, any feedback from the Assembly on this item?
Thank you, Chair. Just to highlight the points from my report, the Assembly wanted to express its welcome for the opening of phase 1 of the Chisholm Trail, and no small achievement. I think it was one of the early decisions that the GCP took to pursue this project, and it's really good to see it now being used and enjoyed by people. Then on this report, that members recognised that the high complexity for relatively short segments that are being assembled for phase 2, and are wishing officers well with all of that. The emphasis of the discussion was really 2 points. One, that not to lose sight in pursuing the trajectory of the route, that it needed to be, especially in the built-up urban area, permeable for ingress and egress at as many points as possible. And secondly, there were a number of contributions about the importance of getting the Coldham's Lane crossing improvements right, as this represented a point of considerable danger, in fact, in what really is a route already, but not quite the mass route we hope it will be. So those were the points from the Assembly.
Thank you very much indeed for that, Councillor Bick. Are there any comments from the board on this? Anything at all? No, which I think actually does reflect the fact that, you know, I mean, the message is very much get on with it. I suspect it is quite a complex little bit of, you know, and I do hope that we'll get everything right. I have had, you know, phase 1 and the Abbey-Chesterton Bridge, despite the fact that I neither represent Abbey nor Chesterton, in fact, is really, really very close to home for me. And I've had a lot of feedback from people saying just how convenient they find it. Really, really very convenient. So I am really looking forward to this continuing, getting us all the way to Central Station. Very, very good. If there are no further comments, I shall remind people of what the recommendations are, of which there are a few. A, endorse the recommendations for public engagement on designs for Coldham's Lane Junction, Cromwell Road in summer 22, which is very soon. Endorse recommendations for public engagement on designs for Great Eastern Street Car Park in summer 22 again. Approve the land acquisition at Clifton Road. Approve plans for continued work in partnership with stakeholders and the landowners to develop a package of local mitigation to support the scheme. Approve the negotiation of land and rights required for the early delivery of the scheme, including compulsory purchase and side road orders where appropriate. And approve the further work on a public path order to secure the links from Cromwell Road shops into the Timber Works development. And finally, approve the work for the further design of all the other elements of the Chisholm Trail Phase 2. Are we all in agreement with those recommendations? Going once, going twice. Agreed. Thank you very much, everyone. Very exciting times. Agenda item number 8, which is the Cambridge Road Network Hierarchy Review. Page 40 on your agenda pack, if you're still with us at this point. We do have some public questions on this item, which we will take first, followed by an officer response and a presentation, and then, as usual, Councillor Bick will give us his feedback, and then we will debate the recommendations. Vilma, do you have any questions for us that you should read?
Yes, Chairman, like to read the following question on behalf of CamCycle. CamCycle would like to thank officers and the Joint Assembly for their helpful feedback on our questions last month. We welcome this review of the road network, which will ensure active and public transport journeys are prioritised within Cambridge. We support the comments made for the need to overlay sustainable transport routes with the plans for changes to the road network so that local people can understand the overall vision of this project, and the call for clearer explanation and mapping of the proposed street categories. We have additional questions on this report. Under the characteristics of a civic street, there is the suggestion that, where possible, alternative routes would be provided for cycle trips. It is essential that there are safe, direct routes via the city centre at all times of the day. Therefore, we welcome the suggestion of finding better options for streets with high footfall, provided that cycling access is maintained and any alternative route ideas are brought forward for genuine consultation beforehand. Could the GCP confirm that safe, direct cycle routes will be maintained and access for disabled people using cycles as a mobility aid will not be affected? Item 10.1 says that quick wins arising from this project will be met from the 2022-23 budget. What does that mean in terms of timescale for installation of new road space reallocation trials? Item 7.2 says that a consultation on road hierarchy will coincide with a second Making Connection consultation with links between the two. Is there any reason why these can't be joined into one consultation to better reflect the holistic nature of the City Access programme? Following on from that, are the public transport improvements still on track to be delivered next year, as shown in the City Access timeline presented in September 2021?
Thank you very much for that, Vilma. Now, before we go on to answers, I believe Mr. Stoughton is here from Living Streets. Thank you very much. Would you like to come and ask us your question?
Chair, members of the committee. As you know, Living Streets Cambridge campaigns for pedestrians, and you may be aware of our current campaign to curb the bane of pavement parking. The recent publication of the revised Highway Code is a big step forward for walkers, and we're pleased that the Greater Cambridge Partnership is committed to reviewing the road user hierarchy with a view to seeing the provisions of the new code implemented. However, it will require significant change to driver knowledge and behaviour if its benefits, such as the priority for pedestrians and cyclists heading straight on at side road junctions, are to be realised safely. I've spent some time observing how people interact with each other at present. There's no indication that any of the participants have absorbed the new rules. This translation could easily increase the danger to pedestrians and cyclists as the hierarchy and relative priorities change. Long-standing patterns of behaviour which adjust at different rates among different users and individuals will make for considerable problems when they differ. So pedestrians and cyclists who are, so to speak, early adopters may find that some motorists have not yet made the adjustment. Care and respect between road users of all kinds will be required. To ensure that the transition is both safe and rapid will require a number of measures. These could include road markings, signage, public information, and speed restrictions. Consideration should be given to zebra crossing markings at key junctions, speed limits of 20 miles an hour or less on all urban streets, and a substantial public information campaign. Will this executive ensure that sufficient funds are allocated to clear visual and informational communication that provides full guidance for all users to embed the adjusted priorities implied by the revised hierarchy. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed for your question. Now, I believe that is all in terms of questions, which means, Peter, would you like to answer them for us, please?
Thank you, Chair. So in terms of Matthew Danish's question, as part of our work to expand the area of pedestrian and cycling priority in the city centre, consideration will be given to developing alternate routes to allow cyclists the choice of avoiding busy pedestrian areas, and that will form part of the consultation going forward. The proposals that emerge will then be subject to detailed consultation as part of any implementation plan. Our priorities for implementing this new network will follow the consultation that is proposed in the summer, because we really need to get the very different views on this issue from across our city and sub-region before we decide upon the next steps. The report does highlight that funding is available for short-term and quick wins, but again, that will follow the consultation and what comes out of that. I think Matthew makes an interesting point around the road network hierarchy review and the Making Connections proposals. They complement each other, but they are different. And they're also the subject of different legislative processes. So I think it's right that we undertake separate consultations on those two pieces of work, albeit we do clearly reference the other as part of that work. And then finally, in terms of his questions, the work continues on developing the improvements to public transport, and a further update will be provided to the board later this year. In terms of David Stoughton's point, David raises an important point, and I think at the Assembly I was able to say that a communication strategy will be developed as part of this new network hierarchy proposals, because we do recognise a revised hierarchy and recent changes, including changes to the highway code. We will need to support the implementation of that with driver and other road user behaviour.
Thank you very much, Peter, and thank you, David, for your questions. Thank you very much. Now, Peter, would you like to introduce the report for us?
Yes, Chair, just a few comments. This is a start of what is a very meaty process. So what we're proposing here with colleagues at the County Council is to review the road network hierarchy for Cambridge. Now, what does that mean? That is, the roads, the highways and byways in our city, how are they used? By what forms of traffic? What roads are lightly used, are neighbourhood roads? What roads have far more priority for pedestrians or cyclists? And what other distributor roads could we expect more traffic on? The classification in Cambridge was last reviewed in the 1980s. And as I'm sure as the board will understand, an awful lot has changed since then. And so what we need to do is we need to reflect that in our proposals going forward for how we use this network and how we make it deliver on some of the priorities that we're trying to achieve as a partnership. And so their priorities about promoting active travel and making sure it's easy for pedestrians and cyclists to get across the city, for promoting public transport and doing what we can to make sure that that's not caught in general traffic, promoting general accessibility, including taxis, and making sure that that's reflected in the work to date. So the proposals in front of you today, Chair and Board, are to start a public consultation process in the summer and really to garnish the views of the communities of Greater Cambridge as to how we need to use our highway network going forward. I'll leave it there, Chair. The recommendations are out as outlined, and I'll happily try and answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much for that, Peter. So before we go to that, Councillor Bick, how did this go at the Assembly?
Well, this report was welcomed, Chair. I think there's a sense that that we've all seen and discussed schemes and advocacy for schemes of a local nature right across the city, many of which have a lot of merit. And it seemed, I think, to many that that what was missing was a strategic context within which we could evaluate and proceed with many of those. and we haven't had it yet. And I think, therefore, that this is a crucial step forward to provide that sort of rational approach to across the city, but to things that we may need to want to make decisions about of a very local nature. And so this is seen as very important by the Assembly, and very important that the consultation that's spoken of goes well. There was a request that the consultation gave some guidance about the relationship between this exercise and the Making Connections exercise, which we may be taking a second step with at a similar time. That I think accepting they are different exercises, but recognising there's a lot of connection between them, and that we would need to address what that relationship was. And then there were a series of other points that members were hoping would be addressed in the consultation by the way we asked people about it. Bus routing, particularly in the city centre, where a big increase in bus routes, even though some of them may be orbital, is likely to put greater pressure on space, access for blue badge holders, and for taxis. We hoped that all of those would get covered through the consultation process, so that we're furnished with a good set of data from the public on their views. But the report overall and the initiative and the consultation process was welcome.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Bick. Now, do we have any comments from the board? I'm looking. Anyone? Oh, hello, Dave.
Yeah, it would be sad to just let it go by without commenting, I think. But at the same time, I'm really aware that we need to keep moving. This whole hierarchy is causing quite a debate around the city amongst those people that want to be involved in it. And I think it's a really important measure to take place, but it is frustrating. There's so many things in this city that we almost know need to be done, and we're being held up by the process. Now, I'm not blaming anybody for the process, it's there, but I'm saying this so that if there's anybody out there listening, you know, it's not us, it's the process, it's the things that we have to do before we can do the implementation, before the shovels go in the soil, so to speak. So I think it's hugely exciting. Over the last year, we have seen such a massive movement. We can see the future, and the light on top of the hill is not somebody bringing us some more work, it is the light at the top of the hill, and I think we can see that. I just wondered, in response to David, is there anything we could do to highlight some of the new road safety features? Would it be possible to put up some signs around the city saying it is the motorists' responsibility to give way to pedestrians and cyclists at junctions? I know this is a bit shooting from the hip, and I don't actually expect an answer, Peter. I'd like it if you could take it away, but some big notices on the way into the city, and perhaps on some of them junctions where the cars are a bit more ruthless than they normally are. You know, just to remind people, times are changing. And if you put it there and people go past it every day and they read it, and then they may begin to take on board some of that, that's small cost, quickly done, relatively easy to do, I would hope. So thanks very much. I am really looking forward. And I'd just like to mention one thing. There's a bus service being run in Huntingdonshire, or Huntingdon, called Ting, which we know about. And I think this is something that this city might want to be taking, the city of Cambridge might want to be taking on. It seems to be a great project. Small bus, going round in a circle. People can book a place on it. They can hail it anywhere, so it's almost like a cab, but it's not. But you know exactly where it's going to be at any given time of the day. So I just want to say thank you. It's frustrating, but I'm just hoping and seeing now the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much. If there aren't any more, hello, Neil.
Oops, there we go. So I just want to make a couple of comments and then ask Peter a question, actually. This is a really important issue and a really important consultation, and I hope that residents of the Greater Cambridge area, but actually those beyond as well, will participate in this consultation, because the more one looks at it, the more you see potential opportunities. We've heard sort of questions about the relationship of this to the Making Connections consultation, but also the sort of quality of the environment and the quality of the public realm and the attractiveness of our streets for active travel. And the more I look at Appendix 1 and Appendix 4 and contrast them, the more I'm intrigued by what the differences in those worlds might be, and also how some of the investments which we've already made, for example, in improving the quality of active travel, for example, on Histon Road or on Hills Road, translates into this hierarchy, and how those sort of interact together. So I noticed that, for example, on Histon Road, that becomes an Appendix 4 primary distributor. In contrast, from my understanding, Hills Road, I think, is a area access street. I'm intrigued to know what that translates to in terms of how we encourage the maximum take-up of the investments which we've made in terms of particularly making cycling more attractive in the city. So there's a huge amount in here, huge amount of significance for this. It's clearly the right thing to do. I guess my question to Peter is, what are we going to do, actually more accurately, with this consultation to make sure that people sort of understand the richness of this consultation and don't write it off just as a sort of technical consultation, and sort of really understand the sort of the significance of it for the way in which the city will start to look and to feel.
Thank you for that, Neil. Shall I bring Peter in at this point, or are there any more questions? Peter?
In a sense, Neil, I think that's already started. People have been very engaged in this work to date already. But I think it is very important that we go out to consultation, that, we can have this sort of legislative sort of gobbledygook speak, but we need to bring this to life to people in terms of how it will impact potentially them and their lives. And so the easiest sort of analogy I would draw is at one end of the spectrum, it's easy for everyone to say we want less traffic on our street. But actually, less traffic on that street might mean more traffic somewhere else. And so as part of the consultation, we will clearly need to go through the processes that are prescribed by Department for Transport, but we are going to need to bring this to life in terms of communities, stakeholders and residents, and saying these are some of the choices and the balances we need to make, and this is what it will mean. So, if we do come up with a revised network hierarchy, we'll need to, the entire signage across the city will need to change. Over a period of time, the infrastructure provision on particular roads will need to be tweaked and changed to reflect the fact that we're encouraging active travel on some roads, or this is a main distributor road and we're expecting more traffic there. So I think a very important point, Neil, and we're conscious that we need to bring this to life as part of the consultation, but certainly the feedback we've had to date is actually, I think people are really quite engaged in this already.
Thank you, Peter. Did you want to follow up, Neil?
Yeah, no, I think that's good, and I hope that we'll sort of maximise the participation in this. It would be good to see a large number of things. I just had one last comment, Chair, which the officer can take on or not, which is that on Appendix 4, which is the draft network hierarchy, I ended up being rather confused by the colour coding, because we've got the green as the secondary routes being introduced between the sort of red and the blue, and it sort of naturally doesn't flow in terms of the sort of way in which you'd expect the colours to go. So when you go out to consultation, I think you might, if I got confused, I'm presuming may not be the only one, but I was looking at green as being further down the distribution of the streets than was implied by the actual tabulation. So just have a look at that. That would be great.
I mean, this didn't help at all, Peter, but on the map that we published, for a reason that isn't to do with probably just Google Maps, I mean, the A14 is in green. So I literally thought the A14 was like a secondary road, and I thought this is a bit weird. But I'm sure we can work out some colours that can work.
We had colouring issues at the joint assembly as well, so we're aware of them, and the consultation will look quite different.
Excellent. Andy, is there a question?
Yeah, thank you, Peter. And apologies, you may have discussed this previously, but presumably between Appendix 1 and Appendix 4, there's some simulation modelling or some work that goes on to look at what the displacement of traffic might be and what the impact therefore would be on different roads.
We've done some at a very high level, but we will be doing it following the consultation as well. You're absolutely right, because otherwise we're just going to try and put a quart into a pint pot, and that's not going to work. So whatever proposals we come up with, we need to be certain that the network as a whole can come up and can manage that.
Excellent. Are there any... Hello, Austin.
Yeah, I'm just left wondering if there's more we could do to publicise this and get people to understand the significance of it. In my mind, the data that we collect from this exercise at the end of the day will be the evidence base and the data that will inform decisions for years to come. And to that extent, it needs to be driven home just how important participation is in this stage of the consultation. And could we hear more about what is the plan to publicise this and to drive it to very high levels of participation and contribution from all of the interested parties? In many of these meetings, we hear lots of public questions that are challenging processes that are in train based on decisions that have been made on evidence that has gone before. Now is the time, actually, to deal with the issues and participate and contribute to getting the right and most robust set of data that we can from this consultation.
I'm assuming that's taken on board, Peter, or do you want to say anything else? I think it's a very, very good point. And as a summary, and if you want to say something else, do shout. But I do think, this is extremely important. And we will have to take on the challenge to make this understandable and accessible to people, exactly what we're trying to do here. Because as Peter has said, we have a road network that was, it's been looked at a very long time ago. And people's habits develop based on where the big destinations spring up. And we've had a lot of big destinations springing up in the Greater Cambridge area since the 1980s. And therefore, it's absolutely important that we funnel the traffic, all the traffic, cars, bikes, buses, everything. We funnel it in the way that it can be most efficient, and therefore, hopefully this project will go well. We will do everything we can. And I think to run it alongside making connections, it's actually a very good thing because we've got the right things in mind. We know where we're trying to go to, and this needs to help us do that. Which means that, unless there are any other points, we should probably wrap up, and the recommendations that we are voting on today are that we are noting the project objectives and up. Yes, Dave?
Sorry, to agree with Austin, one of the problems is actually getting people to engage. It's only when we put the name of a road, when we say, we're going to shut this road, or we're going to widen this road, or we're going to narrow this road, that people actually get on board. there's a number of followers, not all supporters, that will obviously engage. But I don't know if there's any way we can introduce the names of roads to some of this hierarchy, because that's when people actually do put on their boots and start marching and talking. And what's likely to happen, and it won't be our fault, it won't be anybody's fault, is that suggestions will come out of this current consultation, which will almost be done by that time. So the consultation will produce results. We will transfer those results onto the names of roads, and that's where it's going to happen. And by that time, the steamrollers are on the move. And this is the great difficulty with trying to get people engaged. There's lots of little groups around all over Cambridge, definitely, and everybody in Cambridge has got a view on everything. But it's actually trying to persuade them that they've got to have the view on this. And even some of my colleagues, I have to keep shaking the table, so to speak, to say, wake up. In 4 months' time, this is almost going to be over.
Thank you, Dave. No, I think the point is very well received. I mean, that's a lot of road names to put on the title of the consultation, but we'll work something out. But at the moment, we are noting the objectives and the outputs, and we are supporting the draft proposal set out in appendices 2 to 4 as a basis for public consultation towards which we should all work in terms of really getting it out there. I am going to assume that these recommendations are all fine, and they are therefore taken as agreed. Thank you very much. Which brings us to agenda item number 9, which is the Milton Road report, for which we have a number of public questions, which some of them will be read and some of them will be asked in person. We will then have partner body representatives speaking to us, some through their own voice, some through others' voices. And we will then have, obviously, Councillor Bick's feedback, followed by the usual officer response and report. We will receive a presentation and then debate the issue as per before. So, whereabouts are we? Wilma, have you got some questions that you need to read out?
Yes, Chair, I'm ready to read a number of questions. The first is from Lillian Runblad, the Chair of the Histon Roads Area Residents Association. This is a revised version now showing the diversion via the A14 instead of King's Hedges Road. As a result, pressure will come directly down Histon Road and perhaps increase HGV numbers. To ensure that the road signage is set up, thereby reducing speeding, noise and air pollution, and ensuring safety for the residents along Histon Road, it is imperative that the actual signs are in place. PRO 763 and 764 impose a 20-mile-per-hour limit between Akeman Street and the Victoria Road junction, plus 30 miles per hour from King's Hedges Road to Akeman Street, both recently approved. They are essential and should be set up before the diversions start. With the very positive recommendations at the 8th of March Highways meeting regarding 20 miles per hour, its funding and also additional staff to be hired, there should be no hindrance to having this work done urgently. The enforcement of the speed limits also needs to be improved urgently. The MVAS sign in the northern part of the road was removed at the start of the construction on Histon Road, and the speed camera near Carisbrook Junction is out of order. Both the MVAS sign and the speed camera are important deterrent features preventing speeding and should be reinstated urgently and before the diversions start. Both the speed limit signage and the reinforcement of speeding are an important factor to reduce the congestion and pressure on the Huntingdon-Histon-Victoria junction, as the signalling system at the junction is not working properly due to damage to the loop under the junction. HRA asks that GCP make every attempt to have in place at the time of the Milton Road project start in April-May 2022, both the speed signage, the speed enforcement tools and the signalling system at the Victoria Road junction. The next question is from Maureen Mace, Milton Road Residents Association. A. Would